Elliot Tyrone had never kissed a woman. Not out of fear, out of design. But when a high-stakes international deal demands fluency in French, he hires Jasmine Blake, an uncompromising, razor-sharp language tutor known for her discipline and distance. She's everything he's never let himself want: professional, untouchable, and impossible to impress. What begins as a routine business arrangement becomes something neither of them expected: an unraveling. Of walls, of rules, of the identities they've used to keep the world at arm's length. Hello family, welcome to True Life Stories. Please subscribe and leave a like for us, it means the world to us. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The silence in the boardroom was not unusual. Elliot Tyrone had made sure of that. He didn't like filler words or small talk. Everything in his world had a purpose: sleek furniture, cutting-edge tech, minimalist decor. Even his silence was intentional. It was the silence of precision, of a man who had built a tech empire by the age of 32 without the clutter of distractions, people, or feelings. So when his chief operations officer cleared his throat to break the stillness, it wasn't just a sound. It was a breach. "There's something we need to discuss," said Martin, laying a single folder on the polished black table. "It's about the French deal." Elliot didn't look up immediately. He finished reviewing the data on his tablet, flicking through quarterly numbers like flipping pages of a forgotten book. "Go on," he said. "The Rowland Group," Martin continued. "They've responded to our proposal. Very interested. But there's one condition." That word made Elliot finally raise his eyes. Martin hesitated, choosing his words like a man defusing a bomb. "They're requesting direct involvement. From you. Personal involvement." "I'm involved," Elliot replied flatly. "I've signed off on every page." "They want more than signatures. They want a relationship. The CEO, Arnaud Rowland, values connection. He doesn't want to deal with an interpreter or a team of attorneys. He wants to shake your hand, hear you speak his language." The room shifted, imperceptibly, like the atmosphere dropped a degree. "And?" Elliot asked, though he already saw where it was going. "You need to learn French. Enough to hold a conversation. Enough to present at the second round of meetings in Paris." He leaned back slowly, the leather chair sighing beneath him. French. He had never spoken a word. It was unnecessary noise in a world driven by code, contracts, and logic. "I don't have time for this." "You'll make time," said a voice from the far end of the table, his lawyer, Simone. Older, wise-eyed, unafraid. "This isn't about language, Elliot. This is about humanity. Rowland wants to know who he's partnering with. You can't hide behind a company logo this time." Elliot stared at the folder Martin had placed. It wasn't thick. Just a few sheets. Maybe the beginning of a process he didn't want but clearly couldn't avoid. "And what do you suggest?" he asked. "We've already found someone," Martin said. "Best tutor we could find. Discreet. Efficient. She works with high-level professionals, judges, diplomats, CEOs. She knows how to handle people like you." "People like me," Elliot repeated. The corner of his mouth twitched, half amusement, half warning. "She's agreed to meet. Tomorrow. Here. 7 a.m. Of course. They had already made the decision for him. In his own boardroom. The meeting adjourned shortly after. Elliot returned to his office on the top floor, a glass and steel sanctuary above the skyline. His assistant brought him the tutor's file. No resume, no frills. Just a name and a list of past clients that included the type of people who never needed LinkedIn. Jasmine Blake. He read the name twice. It sounded ordinary, mild, but something about it caught on the edges of his thoughts like a thorn on fabric. He set the file down and stared out at the city. French. A human connection. Someone who could see past the skin of the corporation and into him. Into Elliot, the man he rarely showed anyone. He wasn't sure he liked the idea. But like every contract he had ever signed, this one began not with excitement, but with obligation. The doorbell echoed through the penthouse like a chime in a cathedral, sharp, reverent, unavoidable. Elliot Tyrone stood in front of the mirrored panel near the entryway, adjusting the cuffs of his dark gray sweater. Not that he expected to impress anyone. He just didn't like feeling out of control. And already, this felt like unfamiliar territory. He opened the door exactly at 7 a.m. She stood there calmly, dressed in a charcoal pantsuit with a long camel-colored coat draped over her arm. Her hair was pulled back in a low, flawless knot. No jewelry. No smile. Just steady, assessing eyes the color of slate. "Mr. Tyrone?" she asked, her voice low and precise. "Yes. I'm Jasmine Blake." She extended her hand with practiced confidence, firm, direct. Elliot shook it, noting the coolness of her fingers, the control in her grip. She didn't linger, didn't glance around. Her gaze returned to his like a challenge. "Come in," he said, stepping aside. Jasmine walked in with the kind of composure that made even the silent, modern luxury of Elliot's penthouse seem ordinary. She didn't comment on the sweeping skyline, the floor-to-ceiling windows, or the art curated by an interior designer. She was focused. He gestured toward the study, a clean, glass-walled space with a long walnut table, 2 chairs, and a monitor already open to a blank document. "Coffee," he offered, almost out of obligation. "No, thank you," she said, taking off her coat and folding it neatly over the back of the chair. "Let's begin." Elliot blinked. "Just like that. There's no point wasting your time, or mine," she replied. "We have 6 weeks. 42 days to bring you to a conversational level, assuming 1-hour sessions daily. That is, if you're serious about this." Elliot sat, folding his arms. "You know who I am. You think I'm not serious? I think men like you are used to controlling situations with money and strategy. Language doesn't work that way. And I don't work for people who half commit." The corners of his mouth twitched. "You always this blunt? I find it saves time." She opened a slim leather folder and pulled out a tablet of her own. No app, no high-tech learning gimmicks. Just handwritten lesson plans, inked neatly in black and blue. "We'll start with introductions and professional phrases today. I'll speak. You'll repeat. You'll mess up. I'll correct you." He gave a short breath of a laugh. "I haven't messed up anything since college." "You're about to," she said, without a trace of humor. She launched into the first phrase, pronouncing it slowly, clearly. Then she looked at him expectantly. Elliot repeated it stiffly. He already hated the way the sounds felt in his mouth, fluid, slippery, uncontrolled. "Wrong stress." "Again." He tried. She corrected. He narrowed his eyes. "This feels performative," he muttered after the 5th correction. "It is. Language is performance. Until it's muscle memory. Why not use software? Or an app? Because a device won't tell you when your tone makes you sound arrogant instead of polite." He leaned back, studying her. "And you will." Without hesitation. The lesson continued with unrelenting pace. She didn't praise him when he got it right, didn't soften her critique when he got it wrong. She didn't make jokes or lighten the mood. There were no encouraging smiles, no "you're doing great" moments. She was, he realized, the first person in years who wasn't trying to impress him. After 45 minutes, his jaw ached, and his brain felt oddly fogged, overworked, and used to this kind of learning. He rubbed his temples. "You're not bad," she said at last. "You're just stubborn." That's not exactly a compliment. It's not exactly an insult either. There was a long pause, a kind of mutual study. Jasmine closed her notebook and began packing her things. "Same time tomorrow?" she asked, already slipping her coat back on. "Yes," he said. She moved toward the door but paused, hand on the handle. "You don't intimidate me, Mr. Tyrone. Don't bother trying." Then she was gone. Elliot stood there a full minute, unmoving, listening to the silence she left behind. Something had changed in that room, not loudly, not dramatically. Just enough for him to feel it in his chest. It wasn't attraction, not yet. It wasn't even curiosity. It was disruption. And for the first time in a long time, he wasn't sure if he was in control of it. Elliot was early. Again. He didn't know why he was looking forward to the lesson, only that he'd read the previous day's vocabulary 5 times that morning. twice before even getting out of bed. The rain outside fell in soft sheets, tracing lines down the windows like a metronome. His penthouse was quieter than usual, if only because his mind was louder. He sat at the walnut table, flipping his pen between his fingers, eyes scanning a line of notes he already had memorized. He was dressed down, navy hoodie, bare feet, hair still damp from the shower. Not for comfort. Not for effect. He just hadn't bothered to put the armor on yet. The knock came exactly at 7 o'clock. He opened the door to find Jasmine in a knee-length coat, her dark umbrella folded neatly by her side. Her hair, pulled back as always, was untouched by the rain. Everything about her stillness made her feel like she carried her own atmosphere, unbothered, self-contained. "Morning," she said simply. He stepped aside wordlessly, letting her in. She moved with precision, shedding the coat and placing it over the chair as though the act itself was part of the lesson. She didn't ask for coffee. She didn't make small talk. Elliot liked it. He didn't have to fill the space. But today felt different. The air was heavier. Maybe it was the rain. Jasmine began immediately, reviewing reflexive verbs and question forms. Elliot repeated after her, each phrase cleaner than the last, but his tone was clipped. His jaw tight. "You're tense," she said mid-sentence, not even looking up from her notes. "I'm focused. You're frustrated." He set the pen down. "And what makes you so sure?" "Because you're not making mistakes. You're just not saying anything unless I prompt you. That's not language acquisition. That's defense." He leaned back, folding his arms. "Is this your usual teaching style? Diagnosing your students like they're patients?" She finally looked at him. Her expression didn't change. "I've taught executives, politicians, even actors. The ones who make the most progress are the ones willing to look foolish first. You're allergic to it." Elliot stood abruptly, moving to the window. The skyline was blurred behind rain. Distant. Removed. "I never had to be foolish to get where I am," he said, without turning around. "That's your problem," she replied. The silence between them grew longer, more personal. Elliot finally turned back, his face unreadable. "You want honesty?" he asked. "Here's some. I've never been in a relationship. Not a real one. Not even close. I don't connect easily. I don't try. I don't need to." Jasmine blinked, but her face remained steady. "And you're telling me this because you keep pushing like connection is the key to learning a language. You keep acting like it's normal to just open up. Like I've failed some unspoken test." She walked slowly around the table, closing the distance between them with measured steps. "I don't think you've failed at anything," she said. "I think you've never let anyone in close enough to challenge you." His breath caught. She didn't touch him. She didn't move any closer than a professional should. But her presence felt, louder than before, more real. It pressed against the invisible walls he'd spent years building. He looked at her, really looked. Not just the perfection of her posture or the discipline in her voice, but the restraint. The quiet fire beneath her control. "Why are you still here?" he asked. "Because you're trying," she said. "You don't know it, but you are." A moment passed. Then she returned to the other side of the table, gathering her things. "I'll see you tomorrow." And like every day before, she left. No fuss. No farewell smile. But this time, the door closing behind her didn't seal the same silence. It left something open. Something neither of them had acknowledged. Yet, the invitation came on a letterhead so elegant it almost looked like it was engraved. Elliot handed it to Jasmine at the end of their morning session without ceremony, as if it didn't matter. As if it weren't the most vulnerable gesture he'd made in years. She glanced down at the card, then back up at him. "A gala?" "Yes," he said, tapping the edge of the invitation. "It's an annual benefit for emerging tech developers. International partners will be there, including Rowland." Her brows rose, a barely perceptible reaction. "You want me to attend as your interpreter?" "No," he said. "I want you to come as my tutor. I'll be speaking for myself." Her gaze lingered on his face, searching. "And you'll understand what they say in return?" "I'll try." She paused. If I go, there will be no blurring of lines. There haven't been any. Not yet. The words sat there, blunt and unafraid. He admired that about her. She didn't hesitate to draw lines, clean, defined, unapologetic. A woman who didn't just keep boundaries, but wore them like armor. Understood, he said quietly. She looked down at the invitation once more. I'll go, but only as long as I remain a tutor. Not a date. He nodded. But the word date sat in the room long after she'd left. The night of the gala came with unexpected nerves. Elliot had faced rooms full of billionaires, testified in congressional panels, and once delivered a keynote speech with a cracked voice and the flu. He'd never cared what anyone thought until tonight. And he didn't know why. He wore black. Tailored, sharp, the kind of presence that said power before words even left his mouth. At exactly 7:05, the elevator doors opened, and Jasmine stepped out onto the private lobby of his penthouse. She wore a deep midnight blue gown, simple yet commanding. Her hair was half down for the first time since he'd met her, loose waves falling over one shoulder. He stared, momentarily forgetting how to breathe. She gave him a once-over. You clean up well. He faltered. You look different. Hair down, she said. Don't read into it. They rode in silence to the venue in the back of his black town car. The city lights blinked past the windows like distant memories. She didn't make small talk. He didn't try. But something unspoken coiled in the space between them. The gala was held in the ballroom of the Lanford Hotel. Glass chandeliers, mirrored walls, music that floated like perfume. The room was filled with laughter, clinking glasses, murmurs of power brokers making million-dollar whispers. As they entered, heads turned. Not because of Elliot, though he was a notable name, but because of the woman at his side. She didn't cling to him, didn't play the part of a date. She stood just slightly apart, eyes scanning, posture strong, elegant, professional. Elliot introduced himself to Rowland, his French hesitant but clear. Jasmine stood close enough to catch the words, but said nothing unless needed. She let him stumble, let him struggle, and in doing so, let him own it. Rowland smiled. You've been practicing. Elliot nodded. Un bon professeur. Jasmine, off to the side, tilted her head. The first real sign of softness in her all night. Later, they stood together near the balcony, away from the crowd. The air was crisp, the sound of the city muffled by glass. You handled yourself well, she said, not quite facing him. You're a better teacher than I thought, he said. Careful, she replied, lips curving just barely. That almost sounded like a compliment. He looked at her then, really looked. The way her jaw set when she was guarding herself. The way her fingers curled lightly around the railing, not resting, but holding on. She was always holding something in. Why do you do it? He asked. This job. These students. Me. She glanced at him, surprised by the question. I like helping people be understood. No, I mean, why like this? You never let anything in. Her eyes narrowed. Says the man who's built a life without anyone. He hesitated. I've built walls. Yes. And you're the first person who's made me want to tear a piece of it down. A breath caught in her throat, but she said nothing. He took a step closer, not crossing a boundary, but standing on its very edge. You said earlier there haven't been any lines crossed. But what if I want to cross one? She looked at him, long and hard. The shield returned to her eyes like a drawbridge lifting. Then don't, she said softly. Because if you do, I won't be your tutor anymore. And right now, that's the only thing keeping either of us safe. He didn't move. Just stood there in the quiet, the moment thick with all the things they weren't saying. Then she walked away. Back into the noise, back into the people. He stayed behind. Not because he was angry. Because she was right. But God, he was tired of being safe. The storm had been building all morning, rumbling in the sky like a conversation waiting to erupt. By the time Jasmine arrived, the rain was slashing sideways against the tall glass windows of Elliot's penthouse, a curtain of silver that blurred the city beyond. She stepped through the door in her usual fashion, dry, composed, completely unaffected by the elements outside. Her coat was damp around the edges, but her presence was precise, deliberate. "You're soaked," Elliot said, his voice unusually casual. "I walk when I can," she replied, pulling her wet coat from her shoulders. "Even in rain. You could have canceled. You could have postponed." He tilted his head slightly. "Touché." She walked to the study with her usual efficiency, but as she reached the table, the lights above flickered, dimmed, and then went out. The storm had finally done what the world rarely did around Elliot Tyrone. It disrupted control. A heartbeat passed in the sudden hush. Outside, the wind howled against the building. "I have backup power," Elliot said, already moving to a side cabinet. "Just give it a second." But Jasmine didn't wait. She pulled a slender silver lighter from her bag and struck a small flame. With a quiet kind of ease, she lit one of the tall taper candles on the shelf by the wall. Elliot paused, watching her. The soft firelight made her look different, less sharp, more human. Like she belonged in a story from another time. A story where people didn't rush or deflect or hide. "I didn't know you carried a lighter," he said. "You never asked." "No," he admitted. "I guess I didn't." They lit 4 more candles in silence, filling the room with a golden warmth that flickered over the glass and wood. The penthouse, normally cold and modern, felt intimate. Almost like someone lived there. Jasmine moved to the table and sat, opening her leather-bound lesson book without a hint of hesitation. "You really want to do this now?" Elliot asked. "You said you wanted to learn. Rain doesn't change that. Power doesn't change that." He smiled faintly and sat across from her. "You're a machine." She glanced up, a trace of amusement in her eyes. "You say that like it's a bad thing." The lesson began, but it wasn't like the others. With the computer dead and no monitor to display text, Jasmine pulled from memory phrases, stories, tiny structured conversations. She had him repeat after her, then answer, then improvise. It was harder this way. More human. Less polished. They stumbled through a mock conversation between 2 strangers on a train. Then a scenario at a cafe. Elliot got lost in verb tenses, mixed up his vocabulary. But for once, he didn't seem angry about it. "I sound ridiculous," he said, chuckling into his hands. "You sound like someone learning," she replied. "Which is exactly what you are." He leaned back, breathing out slowly, his face half in shadow. "I wasn't joking before," he said, voice quiet. "I've never dated. Never been close. With anyone." Jasmine didn't look up from her notes. "You mentioned that. But I don't think I really understood what that meant until I met you." Now her eyes lifted. Cautious. Alert. "You make me think about things," he continued. "Like how I spend my time. Why I keep people out. Why I never let anyone know what I want until I'm too far from it to reach." Her pen stilled in her hand. "I was raised in structure," she said finally softly. "I learned early that control keeps you safe. Emotions. They make things messy. Expectations? Even messier." Elliot nodded slowly. "I was raised by silence. It teaches you how to disappear even in a crowded room." Jasmine turned the page in her notebook, even though she wasn't reading it. "I think we build walls for the same reasons," she said. "We just use different materials." Thunder rolled across the sky above them. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Jasmine closed the notebook entirely. "We're not going to learn anything else today," she said, voice low. "No," he said. "But I think we just learned something anyway." She stood slowly, gathering her things. As she walked toward the door, Elliot followed, not rushing, not pushing. When she reached for her coat, he stopped just behind her. Not touching. Not speaking. "I don't know what this is becoming," he said, his voice just above a whisper. She turned toward him, her face unreadable in the candlelight. "It's becoming something," she replied. Then she opened the door and disappeared into the rain. It was the 5th mistake in less than 10 minutes. Elliot stared down at the flashcard in his hand. Words he'd rehearsed, sentences he'd drilled for hours. But nothing was sticking today. His mind felt like a locked vault, and everything Jasmine said echoed off the walls. Across the table, she watched him with that same composed stillness, the one that had once inspired him to try harder, but now grated against his frayed nerves. Again, she said, her tone clipped but not unkind. Start from the top. I know the sentence, he said, jaw tight. Then say it. He tried. Got 3 words in. Tripped. Again. Jasmine said nothing. Elliot slammed the flashcard down and stood up from the table, so fast the chair rolled back on its wheels. This is ridiculous, he muttered, pacing toward the windows. The skyline stared back at him, endless, impersonal. You're not listening, Jasmine said behind him, calm but firm. You're reacting. I'm doing exactly what we've done for weeks, he snapped, turning back. You talk, I repeat. You push, I push back. That's the pattern, right? No, she said, standing now. The pattern is I teach and you resist. His eyes darkened. Because your version of teaching feels more like a damn interrogation. Jasmine's expression didn't shift. Because you're not learning the language. You're performing it. And you don't know how to stop controlling the outcome long enough to actually let it sink in. Elliot laughed, cold, bitter, not amused. Maybe I'm tired of being examined by someone who thinks they're above feeling anything. Do you even like being around me, or is this just another contract to survive? She blinked once. That's not fair. Isn't it, he said. You walk in like a fortress every day, don't break character, don't bend, don't even breathe if it's not efficient. I've been trying, God knows I've been trying, but this feels like I'm walking into a firing squad every morning. Jasmine's jaw tightened, but her voice was steady. Do you want me to coddle you? Stroke your ego? That's not why I'm here, Elliot. No, you're here because I pay you. The words left his mouth before he could stop them. Jasmine didn't flinch. She just stared at him. A long, piercing stare that made the silence ring louder than his outburst ever could. Is that how you see me? She asked quietly. Another name on your payroll? Elliot opened his mouth. Closed it. No, he said, softer now. I didn't mean it like that. She picked up her notebook, slid it neatly into her bag. I believe you, she said. But I also think you're terrified of what this is becoming. He took a step toward her. Jasmine. She raised her hand, not to stop him, but to pause whatever was forming in the air between them. Something raw. Something unfinished. You scare me too, she said. That stopped him cold. I scare you, he asked, barely above a whisper. You scare me, she repeated, because I see myself in you. And I've spent my whole life avoiding what I see in the mirror. The words hung between them, sharp and breathless. He moved closer again, slowly, gently, but she stepped back. I'm not here to fix you, she said. And I'm not here to be broken with you. I'm not asking for that, he said. I don't know how to do this. She gave a sad smile, one that didn't touch her eyes. Neither do I. A long, hollow moment passed. Then she walked to the door. Not rushed. Not angry. Resolved. As she reached for the handle, she looked over her shoulder. I need space, she said, to figure out whether I'm still your tutor or something I didn't agree to become. The door clicked shut behind her. Elliot stood in the silence, his hands still clenched, breath unsteady. The words "you're not just a contract" caught somewhere between his throat and his pride. For the first time in a long, long time, he had no idea how to fix what had just broken. And even worse, he wasn't sure he was supposed to. The first week passed without a word. No texts. No emails. No calendar notifications. Elliot told himself it was temporary. He told himself that people like Jasmine, rigid, methodical, composed, needed time to assess before returning. She was never impulsive. She was deliberate. That's what he had liked about her from the beginning. But by day 10, something in him shifted. The quiet wasn't space anymore. It was absence. And absence, he realized, was the loudest thing he'd ever heard. He worked, of course. He didn't know how not to. Code, meetings, acquisitions, more code. But his attention drifted. Simple conversations blurred. And French, the language he had once practiced with precision, sounded hollow in his head now. Like a piano with one key missing. He didn't know what to say to her. Every draft message felt wrong. Too professional, too casual, too weak, too raw. So he didn't send any. Until the night he did. But not as a message. Not as an email. Not as anything digital. He wrote it by hand. It took 2 hours to get through 3 paragraphs. He scratched out sentences, started over more than once, paused to think about every word. It was foreign territory for him, emotional clarity, but the words had to be true, not perfect. When he finished, he folded the letter in thirds. No perfume. No flourish. Just sealed truth on good paper. He added the document she'd left behind weeks ago, a printed copy of his practice speech for Rowland's second meeting. She'd corrected it in red ink, circled his errors, written firm but fair comments in the margins. He had studied every one, and rewritten the entire thing in French from scratch. His version was in the envelope too. Then he sent it, hand-delivered. A courier. No return note. If she read it, he wouldn't know unless she decided to let him. The letter, translated to English. Jasmine, I've rewritten the speech. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Your voice is still in the back of my head when I say each line. Every syllable shaped by the way you refused to let me settle for less than clarity. That was never just about language. It was about how I've lived my life. You were right. I perform. I control. I rehearse people the way I rehearse words. And with you, that didn't work. You made it impossible to stay comfortable. I hated it at first. Then I realized I was learning more than just verbs and pronunciation. I was learning what it feels like to speak without the safety net of strategy. I don't know what you were to me, not just a tutor. Maybe a mirror. Maybe a lighthouse. Maybe both. I'm not writing this to ask you back. I'm writing because silence between people like us can start to feel like truth. And I don't want silence to have the last word. If this is the end of the lesson, I'll still carry what you taught me. But if there's more, if you feel it too, then I'm here. Open. Untranslated. Elliot. 3 days passed before he saw her again. It was a Tuesday. The doorbell rang at 7:01. He didn't expect it. He hadn't been dressed for company, hadn't rehearsed anything to say. He opened the door, heart thudding like he hadn't trained it for moments like this. Jasmine stood there. No coat. No bag. Just her. Pale blue blouse. Hair in soft waves. A look in her eyes he couldn't decipher. Not cold. Not warm. Not professional. Something else. She stepped in without a word, her heels silent against the tile. She looked around the penthouse like she was returning to a place from a dream. Familiar but changed. He stood frozen. She turned to face him. I read the letter, she said softly. And it made me angry, she admitted. Because I wanted to write something first. And you beat me to it. He let out a shaky breath, half relief, half disbelief. That's fair. She stepped closer. You said you didn't want silence to have the last word. He nodded. Well, she said, I's never leaving his, say something. He didn't rush. Didn't script. Didn't flinch. I missed you, he said. But not just your lessons. I missed being challenged by someone who wasn't afraid to leave if I stopped being honest. Her face softened. I missed you too, she said. But I need to know what this is. I can't tutor someone I'm emotionally entangled with. That's not who I am. I don't want to tutor anymore, Elliot said. I want a person. You. Just you. A long pause stretched between them, tense, fragile. Then Jasmine stepped forward, and Elliot reached for her hand. Not to possess. Not to control. Just to hold. They didn't speak for the first few minutes. Jasmine stood in the same study where she'd taught him how to pronounce syllables and resist shortcuts, her arms folded lightly across her chest. She didn't look like a tutor anymore. She looked like someone who'd come to tell the truth. Elliot stood near the table, unmoving, unsure whether to sit or stay standing. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It was watchful, alert, like both of them were standing at the edge of a precipice, unsure whether to fall or to fly. I want to be careful, she said finally, voice measured. Not cautious, just conscious of what this means. Elliot nodded. So do I. She walked to the chair she'd used for weeks, where she had sat upright, controlled, always in command. Today, she didn't sit like a teacher. She crossed her legs, folded her hands loosely in her lap, and leaned back slightly, as if saying, "We're equals now." "Do you regret any of it?" she asked. "The mistakes, the way we spoke to each other, the break." He considered her for a long time. "No, I regret not knowing sooner how much it meant. But no, I don't regret what it took to get here." She nodded slowly, then tilted her head. "You always look at me like you're trying to calculate something," she said. "That's because I am. What exactly are you calculating?" He took a step closer. "How close I can get before you tell me to stop." That pulled a quiet laugh from her. Not a performance. Not polite. Real. Jasmine rose from the chair. "I've spent years keeping everything clean. Work separate from emotion. Discipline over desire. I used to think that made me strong." She paused, then looked at him, really looked. "But now I think it just made me lonely." Elliot's voice was low, almost reverent. "Same." They stood a breath apart. Not touching. Not pretending. Everything between them crackled with the honesty they'd denied for weeks. No business deals. No formal roles. Just two people, stripped of their defenses, standing in the truth. Elliot reached out, slowly, openly, and brushed his fingers against hers. His touch was light, uncertain, like a question only she could answer. She didn't move away. Instead, her fingers turned in his, their palms meeting like two halves aligning. The warmth between them pulsed, quiet at first, then growing. Jasmine looked up at him. Her eyes weren't wide with surprise or guarded like before. They were steady, ready. She stepped in, closer, until there was no more space left to guard. Their kiss began not as hunger, but as relief. Soft, breathless, lips meeting with the reverence of a promise finally spoken. There was no music, no theatrics, just the rhythm of two people who had been holding their breath for far too long. His hands moved to her waist, fingers splaying cautiously, as though still unsure if she was real. She slid hers around his neck, not pulling, not leading, just holding, anchoring. When she leaned into him fully, he let out the smallest sound, one that sounded almost like grief, like letting go of something he didn't realize had been weighing on him for years. She was the one who deepened the kiss. He answered it, slow and aching, as though he was learning her the same way he'd learned every verb she ever drilled into him, with patience, precision, and quiet devotion. Clothes didn't come off in a rush. They were removed in pieces, his hoodie first, her blouse next, each one like shedding another layer of armor. There were pauses, long ones, touches that lingered, glances that asked silent questions. "Is this okay? Are you sure? Are we really doing this?" The answer was yes. In every breath, in every kiss, in every trembling line of tension that finally broke beneath the weight of mutual surrender. She led him to the bedroom, not because she was in control, but because she was open. And Elliot followed, not because he'd lost control, but because, for once, he didn't need it. Their bodies met like their minds had, with cautious wonder and honest need. No performance, no power play, just skin on skin, soft and warm, learning each other in every sense. The way she curled her fingers in his hair. The way he whispered her name like it was something sacred. The way their movements grew more urgent but never rough, like passion was pouring from a dam finally broken. There were no words, only gasps, moans, and the sound of skin meeting skin in a rhythm only the heart could measure. They didn't just make love. They became it. The kind born of restraint finally released, of emotion buried too long finally spoken through touch. After, they lay in silence, not because they didn't know what to say, but because everything had already been said in motion. Jasmine rested her head on his chest, her fingers tracing slow circles against his skin. "I didn't expect that," she whispered. Elliot stared up at the ceiling, his hand tangled in her hair. "I didn't expect you," he said. "But I think I've been waiting for you longer than I knew." She lifted her head, her eyes meeting his. "This is still fragile." He nodded. "So are most beautiful things." Then he kissed her again, gentler this time, as if to say, "I'm here. I'm not running. You don't have to either." And in the stillness that followed, As the city outside pulsed on without them, the two of them stayed beneath the covers of something new. Not a lesson, not a deal, not a contract, just a beginning. Weeks had passed. The deal had closed. Elliot had flown to Paris, stood before a room of skeptical, sharp-suited executives, and delivered every word of his presentation in fluent, confident French. Not perfect, but fluent, and more importantly, human. He hadn't stumbled. He hadn't defaulted to silence. He'd spoken like a man who finally understood that language wasn't just communication, it was connection. And he'd built one. He never mentioned Jasmine by name during the trip. He didn't need to. Her voice was already stitched into every sentence he spoke, every tone he modulated, every phrase he used to express more than just business. She was the reason the words felt like his own. By the time his plane landed back in New York, the only thing he wanted to do was see her. The moment he stepped into his penthouse, the smell of coffee met him first. Warm, familiar, grounding. Then he saw her. Jasmine was curled into the corner of his leather couch, legs tucked beneath her, reading a worn paperback with a red spine. Her hair was down, falling over one shoulder like it belonged there, soft and effortless. A knit blanket draped across her thighs. One mug sat on the side table next to her. The other, still steaming, waited opposite. "Good meeting?" she asked, not looking up, but a smile already pulling at her lips. Elliot dropped his bag at the door and exhaled, the kind of breath that came from a place deeper than his lungs. He loosened his tie as he walked to her, leaned down, and kissed the crown of her head with quiet reverence. "Better than expected," he murmured into her hair. "But the best part's here." She closed the book, finally looking up at him. Her smile wasn't wide, but it was real, the kind of smile that only comes when someone knows they're exactly where they're meant to be. "I saved the good coffee," she said, gesturing to the untouched mug. "I didn't think you'd want the bitter one after flying 9 hours." He chuckled, slipping off his suit jacket and tossing it onto the nearby armchair. "I'd have taken airport coffee if it meant getting home sooner." He sat beside her, took the mug, and let the heat bloom through his palms. There were no more lessons on the schedule. No conjugation drills or pronunciation corrections. But the way they sat together, unfolded, relaxed, said more than any curriculum ever could. "You're not just sitting here because I passed your little test, are you?" he asked, teasing gently. She looked at him over the rim of her mug. "You passed the moment you stopped trying to impress me. I thought I failed that day." "No," she said softly. "That's the day you started showing up." They sat in silence for a while after that, the kind that didn't need filling. Outside, the city moved, loud, fast, glittering in its chaos. But in the penthouse, the world slowed. He reached for her hand. Not out of habit, out of choice. Her fingers slid into his with the ease of something practiced, but never taken for granted. "You ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't signed that contract?" he asked quietly. She smiled into her coffee. "You'd still be rich, still be brilliant, still be alone. And you? I'd still be teaching, still pretending I didn't want more." He looked at her then, not as a student, not as a CEO, but as a man in love with a woman who had once walked into his life holding grammar notes and a shield of steel, and now sat beside him like home. "No more lessons," he said. Jasmine raised a brow. "Are you firing me again?" "Just saying." He leaned in, his lips brushing her cheek. "I think I finally know the language that matters most." She turned her head, their foreheads touching. "What language is that?" He smiled. "Yours." They kissed again, unrushed. Familiar. And just like that first night, it wasn't cinematic. It was real. We have come to the end of the story. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more interesting stories.